Hello and welcome to Super Great Kids Stories. Wise tales from storytellers around the world, which will make you laugh and sometimes cry. Recommended for ages 5 to 105. I'm Kim and I love stories. Hello, Super Great Kids, and how are you? Did you have a good week? Have you been able to visit the sea this summer? We're telling water-themed stories this month to keep us all cool. This week, we hear a seaside how and why story told by Emily Hennessey, who lives near a very big beach in the north of England called Morecambe Bay. I wonder if you live near a beach. Stories are quite often inspired by the places where we live. People look at the mountains or the lakes or the rivers and think, I wonder how they got there. And then they make up a story about it. Well, today's How and Why story was inspired by Morecambe Bay and the curlews, the birds which live along its shore. If you listen carefully in this story, you might even hear the sound of the curlew calling. Just before we hear from Emily, here's a little question for you. Which is your favourite noise in stories? Do you like a hooting owl? Or a howling wolf? Or do you prefer a creaking door? The storyteller Jason Buck is particularly brilliant at making noises, or sound effects as we call them. There are lots in his story, The Old Woman and the Pig, which is episode 137 if you want to go and listen. The crack of the whip is pretty clever, or his barking dog and his bleating goat, or very realistic. Or Kate Corkery's crying baby in eggshell soup. That's rather brilliant too. That's episode 94. Have a think about which sound effect you like best and which one you'd like to make in a story you might tell, while we have a quick word with the grown-ups. Ready? Off you go.
Hello, Super Great Kim.
Hello, Super Great David.
Kim, I have a question.
I love questions. Fire away.
What is the best kind of story?
Well, I think the best kind of story is an old story which has been told for many years and passed on from person to person.
Ooh, that's a good answer. I thought you were going to say something specific like only Baba Yaga stories or Nancy stories or stories that have to have two-headed giants in them.
No, just a story which has been loved and passed along and told by lots of people.
Right, okay. So if we really want more people to hear stories, seems like we're going to need help from our lovely listeners.
Yes, we know these stories because people have been sharing them with each other for donkey's years. I tell you, you tell someone else, they tell someone else, and soon everyone knows the story.
You know what, Kim? I think maybe it's such a good idea that we could possibly put it into song. If you tell a friend and I tell a friend, we'll all have a super great time. And if they share one and they pass that along, a whole lot of us, a whole lot of us, a whole lot of us will have a super great time.
Hello, Super Great Kids, I'm back. Did you choose your favourite sound effect? And can you make it? You might need to practice or listen to the real thing to get it really good. I think I like Jason's barking dog from The Old Woman and the Pig. I also really like Toop's sad whale sounds from the story Why the Whale Has a Sad Song, which is our very first episode, if you want to go and have a listen. And me, I like doing a wolf howl myself. Let me give it a go. Ow! Now, it's time to hear our sea story, which is set in Morecambe Bay in northwest England. So, are you sitting comfortably? Am I sitting comfortably? Then let's give a very warm welcome to Emily Hennessey.
My name is Emily, and I live in the Lake District in England. When I step out of my house and walk up the road to the very top of the hill and look out to the north, I can see the mountains not too far away in the distance. Here in Cumbria, we call these mountains the fells, which comes from the Old Norse or Viking word fjell. I can see Lake Windermere too, which is one of the many lakes here. But if I turn to look south, I can see a huge stretch of sand which is filled with the sea when the tide comes in. This is Morecambe Bay. It's home to lots of different birds that come here in huge flocks to feed and stay over the winter, including a very special bird with a long, curved beak. Sometimes, when I'm standing there on the hill and looking out across the bay, I wonder how it was all created. And I let my imagination fly like a bird to a time long ago. To a time before the days when fishermen caught shrimps using horse and cart on the bay. Before the days when monks guided travellers safely across the treacherous sands. Before the days when voyagers from the north paddled up the bay in their longships. Before the days when stone circles were built. And before the days when the woolly mammoth roamed this land. Back to a time when there was no Morecambe Bay. But there were giants. These giants had a queen, and it was the queen of the giants who led the rest of them here, huge and heavy, trudging and creaking and groaning. By the time they arrived, they were exhausted. The giants fell asleep in a great big heap. But the queen wasn't tired. She was hungry, very hungry. The queen laid her great body down, a little distance from the snoring giants. She opened her mouth wide and began to suck the world in. She sucked in forests and hills and beasts, everything she could reach with her long tongue. She sucked until there was nothing left before her but a vast, empty stretch of sand. But she was still hungry, and so she sucked in the sea. The waters tried to resist, but couldn't. The waves crashed along the sands straight into her mouth. The queen quaffed the sea, imbibing the juices of the world, gobbling up the fish, the whales, the crabs, the cockles, the shrimp, and everything else the waters carried. Up in the sky, the sun looked down and watched, and he was worried. The oceans would soon run dry. This giant must be stopped. And so he shone as brightly as he could, beating his fiery rays down on the queen. The rest of the giants felt the heat as they slept. Their skin hardened to rock, and their hair was burnt from their heads, turning them bald. But still the queen kept drinking. Still the oceans poured into her mouth. The wind was worried too. She blew with all her might, battering the queen. The rest of the giants bedded themselves down further into the ground and carried on snoring. But still the queen kept drinking. The rain decided to try. He hammered down torrents on the queen. Water cascaded down the hardened backs and limbs of the giants, forming becks, lakes, tarns, and meres. But the queen herself barely noticed. Still she kept drinking. The moon could see that none of this was working. That night she began to sing a soft, sweet song. It was so beautiful that the whole world stopped to listen. Even the queen paused in her feasting to listen. As the queen gazed up at the moon let fall a sliver of her silver body. The queen caught it and was enchanted. It was so beautiful. She toyed with the silver all night, distracted, and the sea slowly, silently retreated. But the next morning the silver was gone, and the Queen's belly rumbled. Once more she sucked the sea back in and guzzled it down. The sun shone, the wind howled, the rain poured, but it made no difference. But when night came, the moon sang her song and let another silver sliver fall. Once more the Queen was mesmerised, and the sea pulled back. On the third night, out in the fields, a brown bird was pecking the ground for bugs with his stubby little beak, when a song, soft and sweet, met his ears. Enticed, the brown bird flew over the fields towards the song and came to a huge bay. He saw, tumbling from the sky, something shimmering. He leapt up and caught it in his stubby little beak. "No!" cried the moon. "That wasn't meant for you." The silver wasn't very tasty. The bird tried to drop it, but it was stuck to his face. He waggled it, he shook it, he knocked it against a rock, but it wouldn't come loose. In desperation, he plunged it into the sand, but when it emerged, there was something wriggling at the end of it. A worm. The bird quickly gulped it down. It was the most delicious thing he'd ever tasted. He plunged the silver in again and caught another, and another, and another. The bird called out to all the other short-beaked brown birds living in the fields, "I found treasure! I found treasure!" They all flocked to the bay, but their stubby little beaks were no good for catching the worms hiding in the sand. And so that night, when the moon dropped her silver, one of the other birds grabbed it. The moon dropped another sliver, but this was caught by a bird too, and the next, and the next, and the next, until all the birds had lovely, long, curved beaks, which they plunged deep into the sand to catch the delicious, wriggling treasure. But now the moon had completely run out of silver. With each sliver she'd grown thinner and thinner until she had disappeared completely. The Queen was tired of waiting for her silver to reach her. She opened her mouth wide and began to feed again, sucking the sea back into the murky vastness of her belly. The sand was quickly submerged, and the birds could no longer feed. They gathered on the salt marsh. "What shall we do?" asked one. "Let's go back to the fields and eat bugs," replied another. "No," replied our friend. "This is where we belong now. We must bring the moon back. Only then will we see the sand again." "But how?" "Well, she gave us our beaks. Let's give her our song." And so that night, all the birds began to sing. Their new beaks gave them a song like liquid silver, rising, haunting, dancing, quivering, up, up, up. When the sad, dark, empty moon heard the song, she was filled with love. She was reminded that she mattered. And sure enough, a hint of silver appeared in the night sky. The next night, the birds sang again, and the moon grew a little bolder. Night after night, the birds sang their song, and night after night, the moon waxed until she was round and full once again. And then it was the moon's turn to sing to the Queen, and each night to cast down a sliver of silver. The Queen caught the dazzling silver, and the sea took its chance to retreat, leaving the great stretch of sand behind. And the birds could now feast to their heart's content. And so it continues. The moon, the Queen, and the birds reached an agreement which exists to this very day. The moon spills her silver to the Queen, and the Queen lets the sea come and go and come and go. And the birds, now known as curlews, are still here too. In the spring, they return to the fields where they came from to nest, and in the winter they gather here, in Morecambe Bay, from all across the world. In huge numbers they feed, with their long curved beaks plunging into the sands, and when the time comes, they sing the moon whole again. And the Queen? Well, she's still there, of course. She probably always will be. If you ever come here to visit, look closely when the moon is full, and you might just see the Queen playing with her silvery gift as it dances across the bay. And the rest of the giants? Well, they're still there too, with their hardened rocky backs and bald heads, the crevices of their limbs cradling waters which also trickle down to feed the Queen. We call them the fells now. Walk on them. Climb up and stand on their heads. Sit on their knees. But be careful, because one day they might wake up.
Ah, thank you very much, Emily, for sharing that story. I loved the sound of the curlews calling. Did you hear them? Do you have water birds near where you live which make a haunting cry? I can remember hearing loons when I was in the United States and thinking that they sounded very sad. Emily was inspired to tell that story by the big beach or bay near where she lives. Do you think you could make up a story about a river or a mountain or a desert or a lake near where you live and think about how it came to be? Remember the 4 dragons, which explains how the main 4 rivers in China became? Or the story from Ireland about how the River Shannon came to be? Or perhaps you'd like to draw a picture of the Queen of the Giants sucking up all of that seawater. And now it's time to dig deep into my bag of happies and say hello to some owlets who've recently hopped into our nest. Let's start in Mochweka on the South Island of New Zealand and say hello to owlets Zoe, who is 10, and Sol, who is 8. They both enjoy listening before bedtime and when they're playing Lego or drawing. Sol particularly enjoys The Ghost of the Bloody Finger. Welcome both of you to the club. And let's fly across to Ireland now to say hello to new owlets, 8-year-old Iris and 6-year-old Rhea from Gort in County Galway. Iris, Rhea and their grown-ups listen regularly to the story Eggshell Soup told by Kate Corkery. And they say it makes them laugh no matter how often they listen. Iris and Rhea also love doing impressions of me and Kate. Maybe you could step in when we're on holiday and see if anyone notices the difference. And back across the pond now to Georgia in the US to say hello to 7-year-old Max, who lives in Dunwoody. Max and her mum enjoy listening while travelling in the car, and their favourite story is The Bilingual Mouse. Yeah, that is a great story, I agree. And let's say hello next to superfans Charlie and his brother Frankie. Charlie asked to become an owlet for his 7th birthday. Hope you had a good day, Charlie, and that you and Frankie are enjoying the bonus and scary stories. And let's give a hello hoot out now to 5-year-old Jude Eves. Jude Eves loves all the stories and likes to listen with his mum and with his big sister Goldie May. Welcome to the club, Jude Eves. Hope you're enjoying listening. Let's swoop across to Delaware County in Pennsylvania in the US next to say hello to owlet Abby, who is 6. Abby, or Abigail, particularly loves the scary stories. She says, I like the hairy toe because it's super scary at the end when someone approaches the woman's door and asks, "Where's my hairy toe?" Eek! Glad you're enjoying them, Abby. And let's fly south now all the way to Johannesburg in sunny South Africa to say hello to Noah, who is 7. Her favourite story is The Ghost of the Bloody Finger. She also likes the Rainbird story, which comes from Southern Africa. Noah has 2 dogs, Coco and Chloe, 11 fish and 3 chickens, and she hopes to be a vet one day. Lovely, Chloe. You can come and help to look after Story Owl. Let's fly north up the African continent now and over to Europe and to the UK, all the way to Hackney in East London to say hello to Isabel, who became an owlet for her 7th birthday. Isabel is looking forward to listening to the subscribers' episodes in the car while she takes a trip to the Spanish Pyrenees for the holidays. I hope you're enjoying the bonus and scary stories, Isabel. Happy travels! And let's fly back across the Atlantic now to Tennessee in the US to give a hoot out to Theo and Beckett, who are big Super Great Kids story fans and, according to their dad, listen to the hairy toe at least once a day. Hope you enjoy listening to the rest of the Super Great Scary Stories, Theo and Beckett. And that's all our hoot outs for this week. More next week. Lots of you have been picking up your pens and paints this summer and sending in super great drawings of your favourite stories. Our Pick of the Week picture goes to 7-year-old Colette from Fallbrook, California, who sent us a picture of the Japanese ogre story, Oni Rocker and the Bridge. That is a fabulous ogre you've drawn standing guard beside the rushing, raging river, with his bulging eyes, green wrinkled skin, red mouth and hairy legs. Really well drawn, Colette. Thank you for sharing it. If you want to see Colette's picture and all the other brilliant artwork sent in by Super Great fans, Story Owl posts them all on our Facebook page at facebook.com/supergreatkidsstories. Well, that's it for Owlet Hellos this week. More welcomes next week. And thanks to all of you who've bought t-shirts from our website shop. Do send us photos. We love seeing you in your Super Great tees. And thanks very much to all of you owlets who continue to support our podcast. If you'd like to support us on Apple Podcasts or on Patreon, we'll say hello to you on the programme. You can hear our stories advert-free and you'll get access to our Super Great Kids Stories Express. Short introductions, no adverts, purely story. Great for long journeys and listening to stories back to back. And you'll have access to over 40 bonus stories and at least 24 Super Great Scary Stories. Happy listening. Keep telling those stories and singing your songs. I'm off to do some stargazing. We've had lots of meteor showers and shooting stars whizzing around our skies recently. Exciting stuff. This podcast was produced at Wardour Studios in fabulous Fitzrovia in London.